The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member I've got this. That's right, Braddon.
And what a great place Braddon is. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm pleased that I've got this opportunity to speak on this bill, and I'm going to just move away from the notes of the facts of this for a moment to address the cries from the other side that we've just heard. And what a tired voice that is. The shadow minister that took a brutal axe to single mother payments not that long ago and stands in here and tries to preach to those of us that are trying to clean up the mess of the previous Labor government that left our nation's finances in such a state that those who may not be aware should be aware is costing us $100 million every day just to pay the interest bill on the debt that was accrued through those 6 long, hard years of Labor. Let me repeat that. That's $100 million every day. So when you wake up, folks, every morning the alarm bell goes off, ka-ching. $100 million the taxpayers of Australia have to borrow just to pay the debt that was accrued by that lot over there. Let's put this in perspective. When that lot over there took the Treasury benches in 2007, the budget going forward, not just at the time, but the projected budgets going forward under Howard and Costello were in surplus. Whether you like that government or not, whether you like the initiatives of that government or not over a 13-year period, the fact of the matter is that this country was living within its means, as I would hope you would expect to do in your own household, as I would expect that I would try and teach and mentor my children to do, to live within your means. But in a 6-7 year short period, a dark part of the country's history, we've gone to a situation where we have had to borrow so much money to balance the books each and every year that every day your alarm clock goes off, ka-ching, $100 million borrowed to pay just the interest on the loan. You know how your house loan works. It's hard enough paying the interest, let alone seeing that capital slowly chewing away on the statement that you have to receive each and every month. These are the facts of the matter. And they can cry crocodile tears all they like. But the reality is somebody, some government, someday, somewhere, has to stand up to the truth of the matter. We cannot continue to live the way we're living. We cannot continue to put the futures of our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren into jeopardy. And that's what we're doing. And I'm not going to be a part of it. I'm not going to stand here and say for one moment that the decisions that have to be made by the executive government of this country aren't going to be hard. They are. It'd be no different in your own household. When major changes come upon your personal finances, you need to make changes. You need to make a difference in the way you spend your money, in the way you go and earn your money, and in the way in which you may in fact choose to borrow money. The reality is, newsflash folks, the government of Australia cannot do everything for everyone. If you think that can go on, you're living in cloud cuckoo land, because it can't happen. It is taxpayers' money. Right out here in the bowels of Parliament, folks, we don't have a printing press that prints $50 and $100 notes every day. It doesn't happen. The money that this government has at its disposal to spend on your behalf, you elected us to spend on your behalf, is your money, your hard-earned money. You wake up every day, you go and earn it. You come home and try and pay the bills for your family, to give a life for your children, to build a future for your family. That's your money that we're spending. The reality is we're spending a hell of a lot more than your money. We're borrowing $100 million every day to clean up the mess that was actually accrued in just that very short period of time. Now, that is the context in which this bill, the Social Services Legislation Amendment Budget Repair Bill, appears in this chamber. That is the context. And for those that were listening on radio or are here in the chamber today or listening out in their offices, you would have thought for one moment with the cries of the Shadow Minister that we were going to cut the pensions of everybody the minute they stepped over the line out of this country for more than 6 weeks. That is not true. It's easy for a sound grab, but let's get to the facts of this matter. The reality is, for disabled support pensioners, there's no real change. We're talking about aged pensioners in this context. So we all know that you wouldn't receive an aged pension until you're 65. In some cases now it's 66 and 67 and 67 and a half. So let's just think about this. The bill says that if you've been working and living in this country, whether you started from overseas or not, if you've been working here that long, this will not affect you. The 6-week limit on you being overseas doesn't exist. So get that, 35 years. If you've been in this country, and she used the example of the person who arrived here back in, I think she said, the early 70s from Greece. I don't get it. What a terrible example to give. That person has no doubt been working in this country for more than 35 years. If he and his wife want to go back and see family in Athens or wherever, this does not apply to them. It doesn't apply. So push the pause button on your recording and go back and listen to what the Shadow Minister said. She tried to give the impression that we were going to cut the pensions of those that were just going to leave the country and wanted to go off and see sick mama and papa. Well, that is just a wrong interpretation of this bill. So if it's 65 is the pension age and you've been here 35 years, even if you were born in some other country, you would have had to have arrived at the ripe old age of 30 and you'd still be eligible to go away out of this country and collect your pension over and above 6 weeks. There are the facts for everybody to consider. Now, if you haven't been here 35 years, it is a proportional reduction. That is the fact. So if you've only been here 30 years, your pension will not be taken away from you if you choose to go and live with family overseas in Europe or America for 2 months or 3 months. Your pension may in fact be reduced, that's true. But don't listen to this garbage that comes from the other side through crocodile tears that we are cutting away the pensions of everybody. It is pure scare tactics. They are masters of it. They go to a special school in their early days for Labor politicians to learn the scare tactics strategy for being an opposition member of Parliament and being a Labor member of this Parliament. They are the facts and they are what should be put on the table. They have done nothing. They have done nothing but oppose every effort of this government to get the budget back in the black. Are all the initiatives that have been placed on the table, loved by the people of Australia? Well, of course they're not. Governments are not here to be loved by everyone. Governments have a mandate to do what they said they would do. And we said to each and every one of the Australian voters, we want to come in and clean up the mess. What I've come to determine is that whilst they gave us that mandate and everyone cheered us on to do that, what in fact some people actually meant was clean up the mess, do the difficult things, make the hard choices, do the changes, but just don't do them to me. Do them to my neighbour. Do them to my footy mates, my workmates, but not me. It's a not in my backyard sort of scenario. Well, it doesn't work that way. We are a nation. We are a family. We have to fix this problem together. We have to all take some of the burden and we need to get the job done. Now, in this bill are a number of initiatives that will save hundreds of millions of dollars over the Ford estimates. And whilst to the average Joe public that sounds like a lot of money, the reality is that the savings in this bill alone will probably hardly save the amount of I haven't done the sums, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, probably 7 days of interest a year, if that. So there's still 258 to go. Get it in context, folks. Here are the facts. Let's face the facts. Let's face the reality that we have a job to do. The deficit of the Labor governments over those years totalled $191 billion. That's how much they spent over 6 years more than they earned. With an extra $123 billion on top of that they projected to spend more than they earned, and they gave us that as a beautiful inheritance on the day that we arrived here in September 2013. What a lovely inheritance to have. When that black briefcase opened by the Treasury officials to give the dark news to Mr Hockey and Mr Abbott. I reckon the black briefcase as the little clips on it unlocked, it would have exploded in their face. There was the truth. 191 billion more we'd spent that we knew of, but here, Mr Abbott, here, Mr Hockey, happy Christmas. $123 billion of projected deficits that we had inherited. You think we had a job ahead of us? Well, you got it right. And every time we come into this place to bring about changes to the budget, to bring about a healthier response to the budget, they say no. Always say no. Always. They're not interested in fixing up their mess. They're like the people that set fire to their rental property, torched it, trashed it, ran away, only to discover that the neighbours came to help to save it. The fire brigade turned up, the police, the emergency services to get this thing under control, and they came back and actually shot everyone that were trying to put out the fire. That's pretty well what it is. Pretty well what it is. Now, Deputy Speaker, that had to be said. It wasn't in my notes, but it had to be said because the previous Speaker just cried crocodile tears for 27 minutes and made no sense at all. Now, can I just say that within this measure, there are a couple of areas that will be no longer a part of government policy, and it is true that a number of those measures, or two of those measures, were in fact the pensioner education supplement was introduced 30 years ago with the aim of assisting the long-term unemployed to adapt their skills in order to rejoin the workforce. There's also the education entry payment, that's over 20 years old. Folks, we have lots of other programs in place that now provide that support. This is a hangover from 20 and 30 years ago, and there are savings in here across the forward estimates of $500 million. That can go towards paying off the debt that I've referred to earlier in my speech. But I want to just say, the job of government is not to please everyone, it's to do what the public would expect us to do, to live within our means. Imagine if every family in Australia just continued day in and day out, don't give us stuff, just spend and spend and spend and borrow and borrow and borrow. Some I hear you saying we're probably doing it too much anyway, and there could be some truth in that. But imagine if everyone had that attitude. Well, the government of the country shouldn't have that attitude. It should have an attitude of far better stewardship than that, and I like to think that that's what this government is putting its attention and its priorities into, and whether you like it or not, these initiatives in this bill are a part of the solution, the greater strategy to get the budget back under control. As I said, there are a number of funding mechanisms that are now available to people when it comes to their educational outcomes. They're often collectively known as HECS. $3,500 million every year the government provides under the HECS programs to assist peoples of every age, any age, to undertake further educational qualifications. So don't for one moment, those that are listening to this contribution, think that there'll be nothing left for people as they strive to build on their educational qualifications. There is one other initiative in this, which I'll wrap up on, is the portability of pensions. I just want to mention that whilst we're placing this new condition of just 6 weeks on people as they leave the country, I do have some concern that there are some inconsistencies between those that we're making this change for, and in some cases, former Prime Ministers of the country. Let me put it straight. I have a little difficulty in accepting that we may have a little bit of work to do here, that apparently it's all right because former Prime Ministers are funded under a taxpayer pensioner scheme, but apparently, as I read the paper at the moment, Mr Rudd, for example, has spent most of the time over the last 12 months out of the country, on the Speaker's circuit, in advertising for Hillary Clinton with Julia Gillard, who's now a so-called adjunct professor at some university, spending months out of the country. I'd like to see some consistency. I don't care whether they're Liberal, Labor, Calathumpian, I don't care. I don't care if they're one of us or one of you. At the end of the day, I've written to the Minister and I've said, you want to have a look at this. Why should pensions for Prime Ministers be allowed to continue on indefinitely if in fact we're changing it for others? Why should Kevin Rudd be able to live in New York or wherever for 10 months and collect his pension? I think we should have a look at that. I think the public would expect us to. They would expect some consistency. They would expect us to have some integrity in this, and I will write to the Minister asking that. I thank the House
for his contribution.